Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new Doctor Who YouTube video. So as promised, I'm doing another video since my new video schedule is on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Today I thought I would continue my fan series and do Blood of Silver Chapter 4, my 86th video on my YouTube channel. So this one is going to be a slightly different format to the other ones, in the sense that it's going to sort of have a visual aid. It's not going to be like animated or anything like that, it's not like a fan film. But it's going to have sort of images just to kind of show the story going along visually as well. Lots of it is very, very bad Photoshop, but anyway, yes, I hope you enjoy this. It's just sort of an experiment. Let me know what you think of this new fan series format, and yes, if you enjoy my content, I hope you like and subscribe and comment with your feedback on this chapter. Stick around to the end to find out what next time's video will be. So, this is Blood of Silver, Chapter 4. I hope you enjoy. The Doctor spoke quietly. The Cyberium controls people, yes, makes them more suggestible. But Joe, you have all three Cyberium sources running through your system. You have Blood of Silver. Joe panicked, displayed her right arm with a smooth motion of pulling back her yellow sleeve, and her face turned horrified as she saw not a regular arm, but a robotic, mechanical arm, silvery colour glistening off the lights in the Grand Hall. "I'm turning into a Cyberman," she announced. The Doctor sprinted over to Joe, examining her left arm, which was turning silver 1 millimetre at a time. "We need to find a way to stop it," the Doctor shouted, voice rising with frustration. "I think I know a way, Doctor," Elion spoke, also staring at Joe's mechanical arm. "But it is risky, and something could go wrong." "I'm sorry, Elion, but we have no time." Meanwhile, Joe was still breathing rapidly, seemingly in shock at her sudden mechanization, eyes wide with terror. "Okay, I've recently been experimenting with some antimatter in my laboratory," she continued. "I was thinking, to both help Joe and stop everyone else from becoming Cybermen, one of us could maybe travel to the temple and pour some antimatter into the Cyberium, and maybe inject some into Joe's bloodstream. It'll reverse the effects of all the Cybermen." "Genius," the Doctor shouted, evidently happy despite his still panicked tone. "But we won't have enough time to help Joe. She will have fully been converted into a Cyberman long before I return." Joe's arm, meanwhile, was completely metal now, and more advanced than any other Cybermen the Doctor had ever encountered. Her shoulder was also turning silver, and a tear began trickling down her face. "Joe, I think I know how to pause your conversion into a Cyberman. In my lab I have a stasis chamber," Elion continued. "You can go in there and your body will be essentially frozen in time until we let you out to give you the anti-Cyberium." "Sounds like a plan," the Doctor declared. "Let's go." Sprinting to the laboratory, breathing rapid and hearts pounding, the Doctor contemplated this plan of Elion's. It all seemed to make sense, except of course, why? Why would the Cybermen want to convert the Actenians? "There's only 1,000 Actenians," the Doctor mumbled to himself quietly. "Why are the Cybermen going here?" The Doctor's train of thought was interrupted abruptly, as Joe shouted to wait for her. She was not running like the Doctor and Elion, but walking in a slow, robotic fashion. "Joe," the Doctor cried, racing back towards her. "We need to get you to that stasis chamber. Your legs are converting too." Elion, following the Doctor, supported Joe with one arm. The Doctor's old, wrinkled hand reached out as well, and together the two lifted Joe the remaining meters to the laboratory. "Will I be okay, Doctor?" Joe asked, shaking slightly, and wringing her hands repeatedly. "You will be fine, Joe," the Doctor spoke, a slight tear emerging in his eye. "We will come back, and we will give you the anti-Cyberium. You'll be fine." His hand gripped hers, and he spoke softly. "I swear to you, on my 10 remaining regenerations, that we will come back." The door to the stasis chamber swiftly opened, its metal hinges groaning slightly as it did so. Suddenly, her chest stopped rising and falling. She stopped blinking, and her hand stayed frozen on the one-way glass of the stasis chamber. "To the garage," Elion spoke. "We need to save Akaten." "Indeed," the Doctor spoke back, and began racing down a nearby hallway. "You have no idea where you're going, do you?" Elion questioned, a slight smile forming on her lips. "I'll show you the way." After another few minutes of running down hallways, the Doctor inquired, "Elion, how did you synthesize that antimatter? Akaten isn't that advanced yet, and won't be for another 10 million years." "It's a long story," Elion answered, out of breath. "I'll tell you when we have the time." The Doctor looked at the vial of black liquid swirling around in Elion's hand and frowned. Once the pair were at the garage, a long line of gleaming modern travellers displayed before them. The Doctor took the glassy vial of antimatter from Elion's pocket and placed it into his own. "Since you're going to the temple," Elion announced, "I'm going to the market to stop those Cybermen selling the apples and bracelets." "You do that," the doctor agreed. "Be careful." He hopped onto his sleek blue traveller, smiled at Elion, and flew out into Akten, racing for that cream-coloured temple. Eyes stinging and watering, grey hair thrown backwards, the doctor leaned forward in his traveller and sped up. Adrenaline rushing through his two hearts, the doctor set his electric blue eyes on the temple he was beginning to near. A mechanism sat on top, spraying silvery fumes towards the main asteroids of Akten. Akten, the doctor thought to himself, finding himself gazing at the beautiful place. It truly is wonderful. Indeed it was, as the sun of oranges, reds, and fiery golds burned, asteroids nearby sparkling with rubies, sapphires, diamonds, and countless other jewels, as the Time Lord raced onwards, his lone blue traveller gleaming. Once the doctor had reached the solitary temple, sweating heavily due to his close proximity to Akten itself, he left his traveller to hover at the edge of the asteroid, engine still whirring. Placing his green velvet jacket beside his traveller, the doctor strode across the asteroid and into the temple that awaited him. What he saw was interesting. Inside the temple sat a ridiculously confusing array of wires, pipes, machines, and fans, all made of a bright silvery metal. In the centre, however, sat an enormous tankard, full of what the doctor presumed was Cyberium. It was made of surprisingly weak material, patched and corrugated metal, woven and twisted together in a complicated way. It was at least 50 metres tall, and 30 around. The doctor raised his crinkled hand upwards, wiped the sweat off his brow, cracked his knuckles slowly, and began to climb. Manoeuvring and twisting himself constantly to reach the summit of the array of machines was not an easy task. Bending and twisting to get where he wanted to go, the doctor almost slipped numerous times, as well as burning parts of his hands slightly due to the awfully hot machines before him. Finally reaching the top of the complexion of mechanisms, the doctor reached the top, and found a hatch at the top of the tankard. Heaving it open, grunting and arms shaking, it finally opened to reveal a swirling mass of bubbling, boiling Cyberium. It was an ethereal, silvery substance, with no definitive state of matter. It was just there. Feeling the heat beginning to sear on his face, the doctor stepped backwards and opened the vial of antimatter he found in his pocket, swiftly pocketing the cork that popped out. "For Akten," he whispered to himself, and poured the black substance into the Cyberium. Nothing happened. The doctor, eyes wide in annoyance, frustration, and panic, began to think of any other way to stop the Cybermen, but he couldn't. However, the Cyberium began to bubble more. It got hotter, much hotter in fact, and a layer of gold began to seep through the Cyberium's edges. The colour grew, expanding, until the Cyberium was completely golden. The anti-Cyberium, the doctor thought to himself. It worked. Giddily rushing over to the top of the temple to see if it had worked, whipping a sonic screwdriver out in glee, the doctor reached the top of the temple, and instead of spraying silver fumes, they were bright golden. This should reverse the effect of the Cyberium at least a little bit, the doctor murmured to himself, eyes glinting with happiness. Then he strode down the steps of the temple, activated his traveller, and drove back to the mansion where Joe lay in the stasis chamber. Meanwhile, 2 minutes after the doctor had left, Elion got herself an obsidian black traveller, activated it quickly, and flew left, rather than forward. Eyes watering, she spotted the doctor, hair flown backwards, racing to the temple on his blue traveller. "Please do it, Doctor," Elion whispered to herself, "for Akten." Once Elion had reached the largest asteroid, known usually as Odros, she climbed off her traveller and sprinted into the market. Spices of all kinds wafted through her nose, delicacies and meals laid out on tables, stalls of all kinds. Elion passed, until she finally reached her destination. 2 stalls on opposite ends of the market street. One sold silver bracelets made of small silver orbs, the other sold apples of a silvery colour. Both had vendors who had pale greyish faces and distant eyes, the cold and unforgiving ones of a Cyberman. "Everyone stop!" she shouted, everyone on the street going silent and looking at the girl. "Don't buy these apples and bracelets, they contain Cyberium and they will convert you into lifeless machines." "Is that really so?" a nearby Akten asked, in a cold and cruel voice. Slowly, his fingertips began to turn silver, followed by his hands, arms, shoulders, torso, and legs. All that was left of him were black, hollow eyes, but he was a Cyberman. He spoke in a low, robotic voice. "You shall be deleted." Suddenly, Elin looked at everybody else, but they had all converted into Cybermen as well, their eye sockets lifeless and cold. "Help!" she screamed as the Cybermen neared her, arms outstretched and crackling with electricity. "Elion, up here," a familiar voice announced. "I saw you needed some help." The doctor was perched atop his blue traveller, a vial of golden substance clasped in his crinkled hand. "And don't worry, Elion, I brought help." Suddenly, a rush of golden fumes appeared behind the doctor, slamming into the Cybermen. Their lights dimmed, their bodies slumped, and the previously silver had been rendered non-existent, and a collection of dazed Akatenians lay confused on the ground. "Come on," the doctor said, pointing to her traveller and hovering over to it. "Let's save Joe." He pocketed the vial of anti-Siberium as Elion hopped onto her traveller, and they rode back to the mansion together. Once inside the lab again, Joe remained in the stasis chamber. No limbs moved, no eyes blinked, just complete silence and emptiness. Elion strode over to a nearby computer, and after a few seconds, the door to the stasis chamber opened wide. "Well, that was quick," Joe exclaimed. "Of course it was, Joe. You were frozen in time," the doctor joked. "I'm glad to see you too, Joe." The corners of his mouth crinkled upwards slightly. "Okay, let's get this anti-Siberium into your system," Elion announced, taking the golden vial from the doctor's wrinkled hands. "All you have to do is drink it," the doctor informed Joe. "Okay," Joe agreed. "Are you sure this will work?" She glanced down apprehensively. Most of her torso was now silvery and mechanical, and it was working its way up her neck. Slowly, Joe took the vial from Elion, hand steady and concentrated, and took a large gulp of the anti-Siberium. The silver began to fade from her body, flesh and bones replacing wires and gears. "Thank you, Elion," the doctor thanked, shaking the girl's hand. "Without you, Joe could be a Cyberman by now." "Thank you, Doctor, for saving Akaten," Elion responded. "I think it's time for us to go," Joe told the doctor. "Back to the TARDIS?" "Back to the TARDIS," the doctor replied. Suddenly, a deep, booming noise sounded from above them. The floor began to vibrate, and the walls and the ceiling. Paintings and decorations could be heard falling off of walls in other rooms. Vials of chemicals smashed as they collided with the floor, sending trickles of chemicals along it. Elion, eyes wide with panic, hurried to another computer, accessing a camera. Revealing it to the doctor and Joe, it showed an enormous ship. It was open on one side, and flying out of it were Cybermen. Thousands upon thousands of Cybermen. Actual Cybermen, heading straight for Akaten. "Hold that thought," the doctor announced, whipping a sonic screwdriver out of his pocket and twirling it swiftly. "As of now, Akaten is at war, and we will fight." "For Akaten," Elion proclaimed. "For Akaten," Joe continued. "For Akaten." So I really hope you enjoyed that chapter, everybody. I really enjoyed writing and recording. Well, I have enjoyed recording this. I don't know if this is going to be the right take. Anyway, yes, that was really fun to write for me. And yes, feel free to subscribe and like this video if you enjoy my content. My next video is going to be the first in a new series of videos I've got planned called Writers of Who, where I basically assess each of the Doctor Who writers that has made significant contributions to episodes. So Saturday's video is going to be on the writer Mark Gatiss, who wrote episodes such as Cold War and The Crimson Horror. So I will see you then, and yes, feel free to comment and say your feedback on this new formats of video I've got, and yes, I hope you enjoyed this video, and goodbye.